question. So the question is, I would like to know if the speaker knows about the Lamu port in Kenya and how that will connect East Africa to West Africa, and should Africans use it versus Dubai port? All right, that's the first question. Second question is around the risk associated in participating in global trade. So the question is, there are so many risks to look at when participating in global trade. How does an SME prioritize risk management as they plan to go global? Very interesting question. So do you want to take a step at that, Gordon, before I bring in Mano?
I think maybe Mano first is the speaker.
Okay.
So I'd like to give
I've lost him, Gordon, so feel free, you can proceed.
Okay. Yeah, I think on the first question about Kenya versus Dubai, one needs to look at basically the trade routes. You know, if you're walking by Kenya, then you're serving the African ports, which is much closer and much cheaper as well. You know, if you're walking by the ports of Kenya, but Dubai is more going out of the continent. So within Africa, it will be much more cost-effective and safer to use the port of Africa rather than using Dubai. But one cannot say that the port of Kenya will take the place of Dubai, because Dubai is going into the global village, versus Kenya working within the African continent. You know, so one needs to separate that. Look at what is more beneficial in terms of the trade routes. For Africa, yes, Kenya will work, but for Dubai, remember, Dubai is also becoming a global port for all other areas servicing countries such as Europe, Asia, and all other countries are surrounding there. So it's much easier in terms of transit times. Now, when it comes to shipping, the most cost-effective movement is time. And remember, time is money. So what they look at there in terms of what is the quickest and fastest way to move or reroute cargo or transship cargo at the best possible time. Okay, and the second question about the risk, I'm going to give a stab at it. In terms of the risk factors for SMMEs coming into, you know, there's a lot of risk factors, especially with small companies coming in. One also needs to realize that you're fighting against probably 4 shipping giants. And the giants here are the big companies like the Maersk Line Shipping, Hapag-Lloyd, and you know, MSC. Those are big, huge shipping lines, you know. So in order to compete in that sort of space or that market, for small companies, it's going to be very difficult, because these guys is like, for example, a local IT company sort of going against giants like Amazon and those type of companies, you know. So the trick here is to start off small, and the suggestion I would give you is become an agent first before we can go to the biggest steps of becoming shipping lines, you know. What I mean by that is take baby steps so that the risk factors are minimized. What's the lady's name that raised the question, Truman?
Anne, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
My name is Anne Gaisa. Yes, based out of Kenya.
Yeah, welcome.
Yes,
and so were you covered by that? Are you happy? Any more questions? Seeing that you're the only person that has asked a live question.
Do you have any more questions? No, actually, you clarified that. Definitely, the first question was quite interesting. I wanted to hear the answer around that, because I think as Africans, we really need to think about both intra-Africa trade and global trade. So I was quite curious to see what he thinks about our different ports? Because earlier you mentioned about the ports in South Africa, but you didn't mention anything in East Africa. So I thought to ask a question about East Africa and our greatest competitor in regards to transit cargo globally is Dubai, right? So, and I feel like if you're in Africa, even if you want to go to the Far East, you should be using an African port. But I mean, we still have a far way to go. So in time, probably we'll catch up. But it was, thank you for that answer. It gives me more clarity. And thank you for the information you shared today.
Yeah, and I just want to add as well, if you look at, for example, the African port transit time versus Dubai port transit time, you're looking at about plus minus 5 to 6 days. And that's going to cost money in terms of if you want to transship your cargo, you want to get your cargo as the fastest possible way to destination so you can get paid for it. But if you're using African ports to transship, depending on where you're transshipping, you got to look at the transshipment time that is involved, you know? So if you're moving things, remember within the African ports, it's a combination of transportation, which is sea road as well. And then the problem that we have in Africa is the road transportation is not very well handled in terms of our infrastructure, you know? So we really need to build some building blocks around our infrastructure in order to get cargo moving. My experience tells me that the problems that we used to have with cargo moving by road, it causes considerable amount of delays, you know? So we need to move out of that. And if we can get that, that's why you find that within the continent, yes, South Africa's roads are fairly good and our ports are working quite well, but not as good as like in Singapore, for example. Not as good as fast as some of the Asian countries. So we still need a bit of growing to do to get to that stage, you know?
Okay, thank you so much for that, Gordon. So, Mano, I'm not sure if you want to add on that, seeing that you have joined the call.
Sorry, I just came in now.
Yes.
I think let's go through, and I will
get the questions, the two questions.
Yeah. At this stage, no.
All right. So maybe just to brief you, or maybe bring you up to speed quickly. So there's two questions that we're taking, which Gordon has addressed, but we'd also like to hear your views. So Anne was asking in terms of the Lamu port in Kenya. She wanted to know if you know anything about Lamu port and how that will connect East Africa to West Africa, and should Africans use it, instead of the Dubai port? That is question number one. Question number two is around the risk associated with, using global trade, specifically for SMMEs. To say that, it looks like there's a lot of risk in participating in global trade. How does SMMEs prioritize risk management as they plan to go global? Man, are you still there?
Okay, I understand the topic. Okay. At this stage, I just came in and entered the meeting. So I'm prepared to just listen for a while before I can contribute anything towards it.
Okay, not a problem. I think Gordon has actually covered the questions already. I thought maybe you wanted to add something, a thing or two, just to expand on that. But it's fine. Yes, Gordon, you can come in.
I just want to add something else to Anne about the port and the infrastructure. Like I'm fully aware of, for example, the biggest shipping line in the world is Maersk Shipping, and it falls under the banner of the AP Moller Group. And what the AP Moller Group has done is that they've actually bought off terminals in Africa now, where they've taken full control. In other words, they've taken the job from cradle to grave, basically saying that there's no government intervention. Like in the Nigerian port, what they've done is they've built their own terminals and put their own infrastructure. And most African countries are welcoming that as well because they don't have the money to put up that infrastructure. Like I'm fully aware that what Maersk has done is they built their own terminals and put their own gear in place to keep the production moving faster. So, and African countries have welcomed that move, saying that, it's good that you're supporting us. It's not only a Maersk line, but I'm aware of CMBT. I think, Anne, you might know about CMBT. CMBT used to be one of the highly recognized shipping lines within Africa. And they were also helping countries to build terminals so that they can work faster in terms of ship gear, and the turnaround time of the ships coming in and going out is much faster. So I just thought I'll add that in as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Gordon. So, maybe just a 2 cents from my side, talking about the shipping lines, these global shipping lines. I think, just to add to what Anne was asking, perhaps in terms of the small, medium enterprises that want to tap into the global markets, maybe it's high time that they also come into the party and work with, the Smmes at that level to sort of, help them to take their products to the international markets. As to how they can go about doing that, I think that would be a topic for another day. But I think more than ever, this is the time that, requires all industries to actually collaborate so that we are all able to sort of revive our economies, especially for Africa. The global economy, yes, to an extent, but Africa specifically across the continent, I think there's so much potential. There's so many things that we can do if we were to collaborate, the shipping lines, freight forwarders, the SMMEs, the institutions as well, like the Supply Chain Academy, SCA Global, to also get involved in terms of, teaching entrepreneurs, professionals as to how they can leverage on various agreements and opportunities that are out there to grow their businesses and subsequently growing the economy of Africa at large.
Yeah, that's a good point, Truman. One needs to look at it this way as well, that if you're looking at all the wealth and the minerals are lying in Africa, I mean, your Jacob's coffee is coming out of Africa, but we're servicing the world, I'm just giving you one example as coffee. So we're very rich in minerals, and we need to take up of arms and getting involved, where we as African people in South Africa are also benefiting from like, for example, coffee. I mean, if you look at coffee that is sold in its level of, the raw level in bags, is sold like, for example, like 500,000, but when they package it and send it to you as Jacobs, they make about 6 to 7 billion out of that in terms of profit. So that kind of supply chain should be done within the South African, within the African economies. And one of the problems that we have here as well is that we find that the issue that we have here is that our supply chain is now moved overseas and we need to bring it back. For example, China will buy your silicon metals, your powder, from Polokwane, right? They'll buy the silicon powder, and I know on a weekly basis, we ship like about 10 to 20, 40-foot containers of silicon powder to China. And what China does, China goes into the Chinese factory and it comes back to you as wheel caps. So why don't we make it here to create jobs within Africa, within our continent? Absolutely. So what we are basically doing is that we send our minerals and we're sending our supply chain and creating jobs outside Africa whereas we should be doing it within the country. Now, why? Let's ask the question. Why don't we have these things? Why don't we have our own supply? Why don't we have our factories built here where we can make the stuff here? One of the problems is that I can talk for South Africa. We have labor issues, all right? We have strikes. We have those type of things also impact, and therefore they move the plant to countries where the working force is more sort of willing to work and those type of things. So there is a bigger problem that we need to look at in solving the supply chain and creating more jobs in the country, you know?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Gordon. You've said a mouthful there already. And on the call, we actually have over and above South Africa, we've got Kenya, we've got Nigeria. Earlier on, we also had some people from Cameroon, Swaziland. So I think maybe let's just open the floor. You've touched on something very important, and I see we've got someone from Kenya. I'm not gonna, mention any names, but if you could please share if there's anything specific around, the contemporary challenges that they are facing, and maybe just, just at a high level in terms of some of the commodities that they are exporting to the global community, to other continents, and how are they also doing that in terms of making sure that, the level of export is also, spread through, or should I say within the continent, as much as it is done outside the continent.
I think before we go to Truman, I just want to pick a point from Anne. If Anne, if you can just, I just want to give Anne one quick example. When I visited some of the clothing factories in Lesotho, and there's many there, right? We have many clothing factories there, and I was surprised to see Puma and some of the Adidas that are made there and are sold in America. And what I found out there, and I asked these guys in Lesotho, why don't you all open up your factories in South Africa? And they said because of the labor conditions and where the workers have more rights, they've actually sold up and moved to Lesotho. So there are some countries that have very relaxed working conditions and some don't, For example, Bangladesh, you can go and open up a factory tomorrow and pay the people peanuts, but you'll get workers coming to your factory. So there are companies that are exploiting the labor market as well, And maybe you can, I just want to check on your point about, does that answer your question in terms of the labor market in different countries that are affecting our supply chain?
Hi, I will speak for Kenya or East Africa because that's where I'm based. And in fact, when Truman, you asked me to speak about Kenya, I laughed because I won't take too much time, but I spent 15 years of my life in California in the US. And the first task that I brought myself when I came back home was to solve this issue on coffee. Because a lot of people don't know, a lot of the best coffee comes from East Africa, predominantly Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, and where my parents are from, which is the mountain, Mount Kenya. Great coffee, really gourmet coffee comes from there. And it's not in large production, but it is used to blend with other coffees like Brazil, Colombia, from Latin America, to make coffee palatable for the Americans. And so for me, it was, I have to solve this issue of coffee when I came back, but there are issues. And the main issues was, again, traditionally, everybody says they buy green beans. They do not want it roasted, or they want to do things as they are. And because the people who have access to this global market are the ones who make these decisions, then it's hard for then the Africans or East Africans to actually create their own brands, right? Because again, for us in Kenya or in East Africa, we consume more tea than coffee. So there was an issue around consumption, but the biggest issue was around African brands. would a South African be interested in consuming Kenyan coffee versus Brazilian coffee? And we always found that people want foreign brands as opposed to African brands, even though we have better quality. So there's a challenge around around that.
Very skewed preferences there, and not to interrupt you.
I'm sorry?
I'm saying very skewed preferences there. So we prefer to use products outside of the continent, whereas we've got maybe, not even the same, maybe even something better than what we're importing. That says a lot about our supply chains and, our understanding thereof.
Yes.
So I mention all the other things. You can proceed. Thank you.
Yeah, I think.
But the biggest thing for me really is around value addition, right? So putting up these factories is capital intensive. And unfortunately, and we see this in East Africa, it's quite expensive. The energy, by the time you produce something and transportation costs are high, energy costs are high. So as as a local African producer, and trying to create a brand, it's more tasking than say someone who comes in from Switzerland and buys the raw green beans and goes and blends them and puts a nice package. This is Nestle, and exports it back into Kenya. So we have those issues around, but a lot of that has to do with factories being very capital intensive. And for us in Kenya, it's not really around labor. Maybe like South Africa, it's more around energy, around transport and logistics. And so we find that in this sort of value chain, in Africa, we are the production and we are the consumer, but we're not in between where the money is made. And that's, I think, what needs to be resolved. And we need more education so that more of these businesses find their way in this value chain so that everyone makes money, we create jobs, and create African brands. So that's a few of what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for that insight. I think, I couldn't agree more. Which is why, amongst other things, this is one of the ways we are actually contributing in finding a solution, because I think we all know the solution is out there. What we lack is collaboration, the understanding of supply chains, and how we can actually leverage on our supply chains to make sure that we take the continent to that next level. So, and thank you so much for that. And I think Gordon wanted to say something before we move on to Nigeria. I see we've got a question.
No, I just wanted to say to Anne that the reason I touched on coffee is that coffee is making so much of money. I'm talking about the final product that's making so much of money in the global market, but yet we in Africa are getting so little for it. I gave you the example of 500,000 versus 7 to 8 billion after you get it in a Jacob's bottle versus what we give out in a sack. I mean, I'm looking at Kenya alone. I think the big thing for Kenya is you eye on your tea exports. I think about 18 to 20% of tea that is coming out of Kenya. Then you got your coffee, and then you also got tobacco as well, your soda ash. Cement is also a big one there from Kenya. So Kenya has a lot of exports as well, But my point I want to make here, the tea that you're sending out, and of 20% of your export market, why don't that tea become something that you can build within Kenya and sell it to the global market as a final product? So those are type of the things that we need to own in. In other words, bring back our supply chain where we create the product from A to Z.
I agree, Gordon, but it takes it. Yeah, I agree, and that's what we need to solve, right? Let the world take up, and that's why I'm big on African brands, because that's how we'll bring back the supply chain back to Africa.
Yes.
That's the solution, brothers and sisters. We've been dilly-dallying around this issue for far too long. And I think for decades, some of us have been fully aware of what the challenges are and what could be the solution. around these challenges. So I think it's high time that, we rally behind our own brands whenever we can, and those, companies or brands that we can support, they've got products of good quality. Why do we need to go elsewhere if we can source all these things locally? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
All right, I see Taofi is raising a hand. Taofi, you can come in. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, you tried. My name is Taufik.
Oh, Taufik.
Yeah, Taufik.
Yes, go for it, brother.
I teach people how to pronounce my name anyway.
Thank you. I learned something.
Yeah, great. So, sorry I joined late, even though I came in early, but I think I missed the time then. So by the time I had one or two other meetings, so I had to join in late. Sorry. Yeah, I've been following. Since I joined, I realized we're talking about resources we have in Africa, how we can maximize, how we can make a good use of them, and processing, I guess, part of what we're talking about, so we can get more value from what we have, what the Oyinbos come here to take from us. I guess that's what we're trying to discuss here, right?
Well, in part, yes. So basically, there were two questions: the risk around global trade, participating in global trade, and the other one was, the ports, in terms of which ports would encourage specifically for Kenya to use, and South Africa. So basically, the discussion emanated from that, or from those two questions.
Okay. Because I was in recent times, I started having some interest in looking at some of the resources we have, like some of the goods we produce, how some people coming here to get some of these things, go there, process, bring it back at higher price, things like that. So I've been having some interest in one or two, especially shea butter, things like that, though. Coconut shell, coconut oil, like that. So this is good. I'm learning anyway. I'm learning. So I'll keep learning. I'll keep listening. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you. Taoufik, thank you for that. And I think that brings us to the end of our Q&A session, unless, of course, Mano, if you want to say something, and then after you, Gordon, and then perhaps we can close. You'll have like 5 minutes.
I heard. All right, let me quickly contribute something.
All right.
I heard the topic, and I seem to concur with a lot of things that have been said. I like what everyone has said. I like the issue where Gordon brought in the coffee and, of course, the products that are available locally. And as mentioned by our colleague earlier, just the last speaker, the same applies in other parts of Africa too. From my understanding, I'll just give an illustration. South Africa was a very strong manufacturer of clothing in the early days. I mean, I heard that it's now done in our neighboring territories. When I came back from overseas, I was rather shocked to see that we don't have much clothing factories in South Africa anymore. And I think Gordon touched on it very discreetly, saying our main issue was labor. And of course, various laws that were passed to protect the labor market that affected the flow of the actual industries involved, the clothing industries. I don't know if you remember, Gordon, in Durban, we had a form Man About Town. There were a number of manufacturers in producing men's suits and clothing that were not only for the local market, was exported out of South Africa.
Yes, I remember that clearly, yes.
That's dried away. right?
Yeah.
And of course, I heard the issue on coffee, but I'll give you another illustration. When I arrived here in 2009, I was approached by a syndicate that I work with in North America. They were after raisin, particularly for the bakery industry in North America. I introduced them to a group in Cape Town. And once I gave them samples, I never heard of that particular company again. It was only later through my colleagues overseas, I learned that they traveled down to Cape, they got hold of it, they bought the entire farm production for the next 5 years, and the grapes were turned into raisins, and they exported out of South Africa. Message here, and I think it's very well known, like in coffee and other, must I say, important products, there are some cartels that are controlling these industries. And what Gordon said is the key in relation to, must I say, sidestepping this, in this respect, that we don't let that cartel buy our raw material and sell the finished product to us. We should try to encourage industries that have to be, I must say, ramped up within African countries and manufacture the products over here. Of course, government plays an important part, labor plays an important part, actual rules and relations pertaining to the best way to have certain incentives for these industries is an important part. There are a lot of areas of concern. From our point of view, from the supply chain academy point of view, we can educate the players involved, participants who are involved in actually how to find the best mix to carry out these procedures and practices in its capacity, correct capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Mano. I think that becomes very important to make sure that in terms of professional development and all the entrepreneurship development programs that we've been running with, we constantly incorporate, these type of topics to make sure that we remain relevant, but also most importantly, that we are able to address the typical challenges that entrepreneurs face. And this would include corporates, big corporates that might actually have solutions, but there's no platform where they can sort of, tap into a pool of the relevant entrepreneurs that might actually need assistance insofar as import and export related issues are concerned. So with that being said, I think that brings us to the end of today's session. Gordon, maybe you can just come in. I see you wanted to say something there.
I just want to say that the second question that Anne raised about the risk factors in shipping within Africa, it's quite a large topic, and I've got so much to talk about that, but I don't think time will allow us. We can have a separate session because it's a very interesting session, and we can go into depths and details. I mean, one can look at this. I can name a few technological changes that we have, the risk within Africa, geographical changes, weather conditions, all those type of things, all risk factors that we can look at and we can talk about. So it's quite a broad topic, but it's very interesting to discuss it, and perhaps we can set another time just to discuss it and learn more about it,
Absolutely, and which is why we called this a preview. So when Manu did the presentation, it was just, at high level. So those that are interested in the, in the main course, to dive in deep, and if you've got more questions and things that you want us to, discuss further, feel free to join us in our next session. So the details are on the screen. Feel free to reach out to us. We've got a lot of content also in our YouTube channel, the Supply Chain Academy SCA Global. So if there's maybe, an interest in other topics. Who knows, maybe you'll be able to find it there. But I need to stress the importance of professional development so that, you know, you don't find yourself having to go through a lot of challenges, hurdles, and not knowing exactly what to do. So at the Supply Chain Academy, we've got industry experts for various, topics, business related issues, entrepreneurship. It could be career related as well, those that are in the industry. So we've got, coaches that are specifically focusing on everything maritime, shipping. We've got coaches that focus on, your logistics type of issues, whether it's career related or business related. We've got coaches and professional trainers for procurement. I can go on and on and on, but what I'm trying to say is that please make sure that you join the movement, so to speak. Make sure that you follow us on social media platforms, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and yeah, if you need to be certified, by all means, would encourage that you take on, whichever course that you feel is relevant to your career, so that we can assist you in growing in that particular career. So with that being said, on my side, that would bring us to the end of the session. Gordon, you can come in and maybe you can just wrap it up on your side.
Yeah, I just have one more point to Anne. I just want to, one more important point I forgot to tell Anne about the risk factors. And one of the things, and it's very important because some of these global shipper lines have very big vessels, and these vessels can't come into African ports, The problem is because these vessels, in terms of meters, they run into 400 meters. They carry, for example, the capacity is they carry 15,000 containers. So the tonnage is about 171,000 tons. So it's huge to come into African ports. Therefore, they come into the major ports like South Africa, and then you put them onto smaller ships into Africa, which cost more money for transshipment. So it does expand it a bit, So I felt that was an important point I wanted to tell Anne about.
All right,
thanks.
You see, there's one of the one of the solutions. And Gordon, think of it this way: if SMMEs were to come together, again, it boils down to collaboration. To say we're a group of SMMEs in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Ghana, wherever you are, and you sort of prepare a proposal, approach one of these shipping lines to say, these are the products that we contemplate on moving to the international markets, and then you try and negotiate rates from there. Just one of the ways
and they can
these type of challenges.
Yeah, and what they can do, Truman, they can come in and lease smaller vessels to carry part of the cargo from the big vessel to and fro into African ports.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Gordon, thank you so much for that. Again, I know we can talk the whole night talking about this, this topic alone. So looking at the time, I think we've exceeded the allocated time, but it was a very interesting session. I take it that we've exhausted all the questions. I don't see any questions in the comments. So thank you so much for your time and your contribution and those questions. From our side, asante. Cheers, everybody.
I just want to say lastly, thank you. And Anne, very good questions that you asked. The questions that you raised, we can talk a whole day. We can talk about it a whole day.
Yes, Gordon. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.